So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today we'll be discussing more about advocacy, and right now it's a very prevalent topic, especially with House Bill 2353. And I thought, why not dedicate an educational session on learning more about the subject? And we invited Lori Barnes, she's a great mental health advocate, and she's part of she does advocacy as a parent. She's part of NAMI Kansas Advocate Volunteers, and so her presentations is further on. Just a few housekeeping things like always. So just running through our agenda. We have, again, we'll start off with introductions, and those will be in the chat box. A little background on advocacy, then Lori will be presenting, and then we are finishing off with more information on NAMI Kansas and advocacy, and really how we relate everything back to AOT. So if you could, in the chat box, just go ahead and include your name, your county or whatever, and the role that you have when it comes to AOT in your county. And for those individuals that aren't AOT, go ahead and put down your name, your county, and the role that you have. Just to run through our objectives real quick. So we're hoping that after this session, participants will be able to understand the importance of the role of an advocate, understand the role of an advocate in the assisted outpatient treatment process, or AOT, and we will learn more about NAMI Smarts for advocacy. So to start us off, what is an advocate? So an advocate is a person that supports or promotes a cause or interest of a person, cause, or group. They promote human rights and equitable treatment. The act of supporting a cause within the system as it is. So if something's in place and it's working, so advocating for that to continue. They also advocate for change. This differs from activism, which is based on actions to change the system as a whole. Typically, advocates want to either keep something the same or just advocate together for some sort of change. And it requires nothing more than dedication, passion, and drive. It doesn't require any fancy degrees. Sometimes you can train or educate yourself more on the subject, but it really just is based on a person that has that drive to be the change or to help some change formulate in their communities. It could be statewide, it could be nationwide. So what does an advocate do at a larger scale? An advocate is able to raise awareness. They promote end to stigma. They promote access to resources and support. And they strive to create a more empathetic and inclusive environment. And this you could think of sometimes as organizations, like for example, NAMI Kansas. We are a nonprofit, and we really do focus a lot on our advocacy efforts. So it could be at that spectrum. It could be maybe some advocates in your community that join forces together because they want to see some sort of change or something, some implementation that differs. This could be a group of parents, a group of teachers, anyone really, that they all rally together for the same cause, and that is typically to raise awareness or to end some sort of stigma. Oftentimes in your communities, you will see advocates that are advocating to end bullying, to end the stigma against mental health, and that you could consider them an advocacy group or just advocate themselves. And what does an advocate do at an individual level? And when you think of this individual level, you could think of maybe family members, caregivers, case managers, therapists, even the person themselves. And within this individual role, you see that an advocate is able to give a voice to an individual when they may not have a voice themselves. They listen to the individual's thoughts, ideas, and desires. They prepare to be aware for any crisis. They provide information, support, and guidance. They ask questions, and they know HIPAA laws and limitations. Here, especially with our AOT programs, we peer support specialists. They're advocates too, for the peer that they're working with. Um, Therapists or case managers, they will be advocating for the peer, maybe to receive a specific type of treatment or medication and such. Some of our stronger advocates are sometimes parents and caregivers. They notice that their loved one is struggling with mental health or maybe medication adherence, something in specific, and they're able to give that voice to the individual, especially if their loved one at that point isn't able to speak up for themselves. And sometimes a person can be their biggest advocate. So they're able to hopefully speak up, and really they're able to emphasize what their needs are, what they are struggling with. Especially if they're able to ask questions about their care, and help be part of the decision making when it comes to their care. And we see that in the structure of AOT, participants being able to have a voice of maybe why they're not medication compliant, or why they're not going to the court dockets or their appointments, and they're able to hopefully speak up and advocate for themselves, maybe helping the treatment team decide on any changes that need to be made. Um, and again, if you're an advocate, like a caregiver or a family member, it's important to know those HIPAA laws and limitations. Sometimes they can get confusing, but being able to know those boundaries, what you could do as a parent. And how to be an effective advocate. And this is something that it consists of maybe eventually developing the strong skills, and those strong skills include public speaking, writing, and research skills. If you are advocating potentially at, for example, at a committee hearing, it's important, if you write a written testimony, it's important that your writing skills are stronger, so you're able to write that testimony. If you're actually speaking during the committee, making sure you're aware of those public speaking skills, and with that it includes your research skills. So you're making sure how to distinguish credible sources. That's very important. I think here recently, sometimes we get caught up on what we see on the media, maybe what we see on the news, on social media, on maybe an email. And it's important when you see a strong subject that you want to advocate for, maybe just making sure you're taking time and you are researching that yourself, just to make sure that you're using credible sources. And with that, I really do recommend using the NAMI.org website. It's always one of those resources that I recommend. Just check it out first, and that could lead you to further resources. And on NAMI.org, you also find information on how to get involved on being an advocate. And this could be the state level or the national level. And they have steps, and they have different links or committees that you could potentially join. And it's also a very good educational tool. The NAMI website has tools on different information on mental health conditions, different information on there's a section on HIPAA, and breaking that down. And there's stuff on cultural competency as well. So it's sometimes, if you don't know where to start, we highly recommend the NAMI.org website. And other uh, website is the Treatment Advocacy Center, the TAC website. Here recently, they went through a redesign, and the website is now really user friendly. And if you make an account, you're then able to access a resource library, and within that resource library, there's different published articles, or different documents that are already prepared and ready to go in case anyone needs to use it. And it does include stuff on advocacy, and they have a section now on their website that's specifically for advocates, and has links on where you could join, and in case you want to join one of their groups, join their emailing lists. And another recommendation too is a SMI Advisor website. SMI Advisor, you just have to make an account, a free account, so you could access their information. And they have a lot of really good resources when it comes to just mental health conditions and others. And there's also a section on AOT. They have some information on there. And sometimes it does lead you back to the treatment advocacy website, but that is also a really good resource. And overall, the important thing to just to realize whenever you're advocating for something is that just practice makes perfect. At the beginning, it could maybe be anxiety provoking, especially if it's a peer trying to advocate for themselves. It could be a very anxiety provoking activity, but as with practice, they'll get more comfortable with it. They'll be more comfortable sharing their story or being able to effectively communicate what they need. And that also includes with loved ones. Eventually, they'll become maybe more knowledgeable of the HIPAA laws or more knowledgeable about the cause that they're advocating for, and they'll be more comfortable speaking up. So that's something we always recommend. Just practice any of your skills, and eventually you will get to the point where you're able to maybe more effectively communicate what you're trying to advocate for. And this is also where we recommend our NAMI educational programs. For example, in NAMI Family to Family, during that 8-week educational course, there are multiple times throughout those 8 weeks where we touch base on how to be an advocate for your loved one. We break down just those HIPAA law requirements, questions that loved ones might have in regards to medication or therapy appointments and such. And during that class, it teaches a family member or caregiver, whoever takes that course, on how to advocate for themselves as that family member, but also how to be an advocate for their loved one. And sometimes that's also an important skill to have. You're not really sure of those HIPAA limitations or those different boundaries, but during that class, we're able to break down some of that and answer some of those questions. So sometimes for a family member, that's a really good first step is enrolling for that class, learning more about mental illnesses and learning how to be an advocate and learning how to care for yourself. With that, we also tie in NAMI peer-to-peer, which is on focusing on the peer. So that's an 8-week educational course that focuses on teaching peers these skills. And during that class, during those 8 weeks, we also break down and provide skills for peers on how to advocate for themselves. And that's very similar, just how to be advocates for themselves with their family members, maybe their treatment teams in the community. So another really recommended skill. And we also have what we call NAMI Smarts for Advocacy, and Lori will be getting into further detail about that. But those are 3 of the NAMI educational courses that we really do recommend for people that maybe are thinking of they want to advocate a little bit more or use their advocacy skills more. That's a great first step on just educating yourself on the topic, and just gaining more skills to use for yourself. And with that, I will turn it over to Lori. And Lori is a great advocate. She has been doing this for a while.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for having me on here. First, I'm going to tell you why I became an advocate and tell my story, and then I will get into the advocacy part. So July 8th, 2021, our oldest son, Daniel, took his own life. He had battled with mental illness for about 8 years. You know, when you look back being your first child, you don't see anything. I mean, you don't know what to look for. You don't know, signs of mental illness. He was smart. He was happy. He was tested for the gifted program. At age 3, he was doing 100-piece puzzles. Like, he was just very active, met all his milestones. And that continued till about 8th grade. And then you start noticing changes. At one point, we were on a trip and I had to fly back, and because he was having his first major episode, and I took him to the therapist. We had kind of started seeing a little bit for his anxiety, and he told her he was 7 out of 10 on taking his own life. So we took him in the emergency room, and they took him to Good Shepherd in Wichita, which is like a mental health place to like do testing and work with your child. And He was there 3 times in 1 year. We finally found another therapist, and he was amazing. They tested him and got him some new medication, and he started thriving again, which was amazing. The older he got, the worse it got, which is one reason that I'm not that mental health. That's why I try to advocate, because a lot of mental health issues do not show up till your late teens or your early in adult. So you have all of these goals and all of these dreams and ambitions that you look for. Then all of a sudden you get slammed with something and you're like, oh, guess what? Guess I can't. So it's really hard on them. And so I'm trying to find ways to help those family members and loved ones and those in that situation. We couldn't travel with them. We couldn't, it just everything got crazy. We did another testing when he was a senior in high school, and they discovered he was bipolar. So we did the gene site testing because we wanted to make sure he had the right medication, and got that all switched, and that was lovely. But then things happen again, he gets triggered. I mean, it was just this constant process of learning how to advocate for him and how to make him feel like he was okay. Being in a rural area, we have 1,000 people in our town. He had 14 in his senior class, but the principals and a lot of them, the stigma was so bad with mental illness. We had him on a 504 plan. And since he was smart and was in Scholars Bowl and everything else, well, he doesn't need anything. I'm like, yeah, he does. Just because he's smart doesn't mean he doesn't have anxiety or mental health issue. So we had to fight for even to keep him and get him on a 504 plan. So there's just so much out there. He went to Cali College. He tried. He was on their Scholars Bowl team, and that lasted a semester. It just kept getting worse. When he was 21, he wants to go out and do things like all of his friends and party, and you can't because the medication you're on. And so it just became a struggle. I really don't believe he wanted to die. He just couldn't live that way anymore. And he just was tired of the struggle. He was an incredible artist. You can show the next slide, Itzel, that shows more pictures of him. He was a great musician, and he just played the piano, the saxophone, his art. He just was lovely. That day that he took his life, we had I don't know how many messages, maybe 60 text messages back and forth. My husband, he was actually in Oklahoma City at the time. My husband went down to try to help him. He left. The whole thing was you feel lost as a parent, and I didn't know about NAMI. I didn't know about things because our little rural area, there's not a lot of resources. And, I got a text about 3:30 that day that said, love you, Mom. Like, love you too. Because we had not like a major argument, but we had been going back and forth all day because I wanted to go get help. And that was his saying goodbye to me. So, being a suicide survivor loss person, it's a trigger every day too. So now I need NAMI, for my anxiety and for my support and for my therapy. And so it's been great. So when I discovered NAMI, the first thing I found researching was this NAMI Smarts for Advocacy class, because I wanted to be Daniel's voice and I want to help others that are like Daniel. Yeah, there's some of his artwork. The one in the top right, that's like the moon and the pyramid. That is my favorite one. I have postcards made of that. I have a blanket made of it. I have all kinds. It's just, he was self-taught. It was lovely. So I started taking the NAMI Smarts for Advocacy class because I was going to make sure no one had to go through what Daniel did. I could help others that were in our situation. So he died July 2021. I took the class that fall, and in January of 2022, I was in Topeka. Like, I didn't waste any time. And people were always like, how did you do that? And I'm like, what are you supposed to do? You know, like, I still have another son at home. I have my husband. I have my father we help. I'm like, you know, things have to change. So I took these classes and I started going to Topeka. They were amazing. You know, the first one talks about telling your story, which helps because a lot of times you don't have a lot of time to meet with people or talk with them. So then the second one is, I'm gonna move my thing. Sorry. Is, you know, contacting your representative or legislator. And then the third one is having a meeting. So those are the three things you learn in these classes. They give you the best tools. So with NAMI too, with doing this, I discovered we did not have anything in our area. So I worked with Sherry Vaughn with NAMI Kansas, and we got NAMI in our rural area. So that's why we have NAMI South Central Kansas. So now we're trying to grow. Amy is our affiliate coordinator. That she, you know, we think we have 9 people now. So we're trying to get all trained and trying to learn and trying to make a difference. Okay, next screen, please. Okay, so module 1, it's called Telling Your Story. And you learn how to introduce yourself, to tell what happened, to tell what helped, how are you different today, what the need or the problem is, what will help others, and the ask. So basically, you're telling them why advocacy for mental health care is important through your story. And it's got 7 steps that you learn how to tell your story, and you learn how to tell your story to make it more, I don't know how to influence the politicians. Okay, next one. Then the second one, you learn how to contact them, whether it's email, a letter, a phone call. You learn, you know, how to, like, if you send an email in the subject line, how you need to put the House bill or the Senate bill you're, you know, talking about in there, because they will actually file the information in their file under that bill number. How to greet the person if it's a, you know, senator, representative, a chairperson, what your issue is and your position, why it's personal to you, your story that you learn in the first module, and learn how you get your talking points in order. And then the ask. There's always an ask at the end, like, can I have your support? Will you support me with this? You know, and then you thank you, and then you're closing. So it gives you the guidelines or the outline, because it could be an elevator speech. You could be, you know, in the Capitol, and you get an elevator, which happened to me one time. And here comes Representative Cheryl. And I was like, oh my gosh, hey, I have an appointment with you, you know, in 2 weeks. This is what I'm talking about. And that day she was like, oh, well, this is who you need to contact. I'm like, oh, so I'm writing on the outside of my folder, like, okay, now I got to go talk to this person. But you've got to learn how to, you know, or leave a voicemail, you know, if you get caught off guard, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? It gives you the tools needed to contact them. Okay, next slide, please. So the third one is about meeting your policy maker, which is kind of scary, but it's really, once you get there and I don't know, I always get to Topeka and my whole mindset changes, and I'm fearless, because I think you're just when you're really passionate about what you're doing, it's amazing. Even though the first time you're really nervous, you know, it gets better. But when you meet your policymaker, on introducing yourself, thanking them for meeting you, what your issue is, what the problem is, then your story again, and then the ask, the thank you, you leave information, like, so you can make, you know, type up a little note or take a flyer and go, hey, this is what, I'm meeting about, because then they'll put that in that file under that policy or issue you're filing for. In the third one with meeting your policymaker, that the picture that's there, it's called a backgrounder, and it is amazing. You can go online, and I'll show you later, the legislative site, and like everything I want is in the Judiciary Council. So I will go in the Judiciary Committee and I will get their official, what their name is, what their room number is, who their secretary is, their phone number, their bio, their committees. I will get everything I can possibly find on this person and put it on this sheet, because it's just, you never know what you're going to have in like the same thoughts or the same, I don't know, not committees, but I don't know why I can't think of the word, but same likes, like, oh, I saw you went to K-State, I did too. Or so you can get information on them, so where you can try to use that to connect with them better. So when I go to Topeka, like I said, I have one of these for everybody. I have them in alphabetical order. I have, or if I know who I'm meeting with that day, I put them in order of my meetings. And so I can look at that before I go in and realize, hey, this is the room number he's in. Hey, this is a secretary name. So I can go in and feel prepared, because being prepared is huge. Because like I said, you might have 5 minutes, you might have 15 minutes. You never know how much time you're going to have. So being prepared and having all your ducks in a row, I guess, as you would call it, is very, very helpful. Okay, next slide, please. So NAMI Kansas, we have an advocacy committee, and every year we focus on different policies that we're going to fight for and push for. So like this year we have the 988, we have mental health crisis response and suicide prevention, Medicaid, Medicare access to quality, affordable mental health care, student mental health. We have early intervention and treatment options. Next slide, please. We have special committee, like they have a special committee on housing. We want to help with homeless. Then Etzel, the 2353, the assisted outpatient treatment, which is going really well right now. And then we have the 2345 supportive decision-making agreement. That's my baby right now. That's what I'm pushing for. That's what I'm trying to get done. And I'll give you some more information on that in a minute. Next screen, please. So the mental health crisis and suicide prevention, we want to make sure we establish and sustain funding for 988. Establish and expand and fund mobile crisis teams. We want to increase availability, capacity, and access to crisis stabilization service, support policy standards and training associated with crisis response and improvement. We want to make sure there's access to quality, affordable mental health care through expanding Medicaid, increase Medicaid reimbursement rates, eliminate harmful step therapy practices, develop accessible, affordable, robust broadband across Kansas, increase telehealth availability and accessibility for mental health care, enhance and enforce parity laws, and to strengthen and develop the mental health workforce. Which, even though I can't stand COVID, I will say one of the things that came out of that has been lovely is the telehealth, because it's really hard for some people to get. So we need to make sure that continues. Early intervention treatment options. So we want to make sure we have increased school-based services and screenings, increased adverse childhood experience screenings, social emotional learning programs, and mental health education, which I had met with the Kansas Department of Education and the gal who does their mental health, because I was like, the teachers don't seem to be as bad in the school, but the administration seems to not be in touch with anything. They just don't seem to, be where they need to be. And with everything anymore and mental health cases on the rise, I kind of feel like if you're going to college to be in education, you should probably have more classes on mental health and, you know, learn how to connect with these kids better. And we've got here in our town, we have a gal that is basically in our elementary school, and that's her job, is to kind of look out for kids and make sure they're not lost in the system and help them and try to connect with them. And it's great. So then the person-centered care, the enact the supportive decision-making agreement. So the supportive decision-making agreement is like a mid-level approach. You help share their decisions, basically. You're not their voice. They get to keep their rights. You don't take their rights away from them. But, you don't have to go through a court. It's not a guardianship. It's not a power of attorney. It's basically like, so with Daniel, when he was having an episode, he could not make decisions for himself. But other than that, for 3 months, he would be fine. And he could, go to work and do his thing. But it would have gave us a paper to sign with him and have it notarized. And like, if he was having an episode, I'd be like, hey, no, this is what he wants. This is what he is signed for. This is what he's done. I need you to watch him for 24 hours. He wants to be okay. But when, it just gives you a little bit more of a push to help them with letting them keep their rights, which I think is very important because it works for those, with mental health and disabilities. It's just it's a great option. And then we have to establish and expand our assisted outpatient treatment program, increase access to specialty courts, support coordinated specialty care investment in coverage and housing. So I know like Itzel and them are doing the AOT, and I think it's lovely because a lot of these people just need a chance. And once they get that chance, it's amazing what they can accomplish. So I know that from what Itzel's told me, I don't know if I'm going to talk too soon, but it is past the committee, which is going to the floor. So which that's important. The supportive decision-making, it's still in committee. We're working. I testified. I did my first in-person testifying, which was nerve-wracking. But I did that on January 17th. And so we're working with the Kansas Bankers Association and the Kansas Bar on making some amendments because there was some wording that they weren't really fond of. So I think after turnaround on February 23rd, we're going to work with them more and hopefully get this going. There's things that I've learned. There are committees that are exempt, which I had never known that either. So Judiciary Committee is an exempt committee. So last year when supportive decision-making agreement got introduced, they hadn't had the hearing, but they just introduced the bill. But usually a bill will die at a certain time of the year, but if they're an exempt committee, it has 2 years to make it through the process. So I keep learning things all the time. Okay, next slide. So Itzel had mentioned on the website on NAMI, there are ways you can help advocate in different ways. So you can go on to that NAMI headquarters and there's a thing you can sign up for advocacy alerts. I act for mental health because my son has a mental health condition and I want to make sure he gets the help he needs. I want to expand 988. I just to grow mental health in the workforce, which is a problem right now. I want better mental health care in school, but they will send you emails that basically give you what is being said. And basically you put your information in there and send it. It'll have your reps in there. It'll have your senators. And so it helps you advocate, which I think is lovely. the next, is that, sorry. So since I took the NAMI Smarts advocacy classes, I wanted to teach them because I want to help others learn how to advocate, whether it's for themselves, for a loved one, for a friend, or for their job. So we have the first three, the ones I talked about, are the ones we usually teach. And so we had just finished our third module last night. But March 12th, so Mental Health Advocacy Day in Topeka is March 13th at the Capitol. And it's, if anybody has a chance to go, you need to go. It's lovely. There's so many exhibitors and sponsors there with all kinds of information on mental health. And there's lunch, it's just, the whole thing is just, seeing all these people come together for one cause is just great. So on March 12th, we are doing an in-person training at NAMI, and we're going to teach modules 1 and 3 about how to tell your story, and then how to meet in person, since you will be going to the Capitol. So the advocacy at NAMIKansas.org, or there's that QR code there. So it'd be from 1 to 4 the day before, and it costs you nothing. It's free, and we'll have snacks. We'll have all the worksheets. So if you want to come and learn how to advocate, and then go to Topeka, the Capitol, the next day, and knock on doors. And there's so also Kansas Mental Health Coalition, they have, and I'll show you their site too, has tips on how to contact your lawmaker, or I don't know, lawmaker, is that correct? That sounds weird. Your representative or senator, how to contact them and get an appointment, or somebody can help make that appointment for you also. And if you are coming from out of town, I think they said over 100 miles, there's a limit, but they will get a hotel room for you that night before. So if you're driving from, Dodge City or Cimarron, and you want to take this class, they'll put you in a hotel that Tuesday night, so you can go to the Capitol the next day and not have to worry about driving back and forth or finding somewhere. Next slide, please. So yeah, here's Mental Health Advocacy Day, and it's, like I said, it's lovely. They have issue papers too, that they kind of like NAMI does, that they hand out to everybody at the Capitol. But it's, when you do the lunch, it's great because all the reps and the senators come down and get a lunch. So it's another opportunity to see them, shake their hand, introduce yourself. Or if you've known them before, a chance to catch up. So, but that is, you can sign up for that too on the Kansas Mental Health Advocacy Day page, which I can show you that also. So since I am a parent advocate, I am a NAMI advocate, and I'm a Mental Health Coalition advocate. When I first, after Daniel, I first started doing the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which they are great. But I am more wanting to help people and make policy change. I want to be proactive instead of reactive, I guess is the word. So I made my own little business card because I never know who, if I go talk to somebody, who I'm doing it for. So I just have mental health advocate. That way I can explain to somebody, or whatever situation I'm in, I don't have to worry about explaining. So that's my contact information.
Lori, do you want me to switch over so you could share your screen and walk us through the website?
Yes, please.
Okay, give me a second. You could go ahead now.
Okay, let me find hang on. Share screen, hang on. Okay, so when you go to the Kansas legislative website, so like if you're looking for your bill, like so 2345 is my supportive decision-making agreement. And it'll come up and give you what the short title is, you know, the hearing, who's the committee. And so if you, so like I want to contact everybody in the committee for judiciary now, because this is where I know my bill is. You can click on the committee to judiciary and it'll come up with their meeting times, which all of their meetings are on YouTube. So you can watch the House chamber, you can watch, you know, all committees are on YouTube. And then all their people who are on the committee are on the side. So on that, the informational page, the backgrounder check. So if you click on Susan Humphreys, so when I was filling out my backgrounder, I can go in all of her contacts on the side, the room number, her phone number, her email, where she's from, you can fill it out. And a lot of times, instead of writing down all the committee stuff, because they're involved with so many, I will grab and just highlight this and print that little bit of information and then tape it onto my page, because it's so much easier. And I like that too, because it has the times. Because that way, if you're like, I want to meet with her, oh, I can't meet with her at 1:30 on this day because she's in. So it helps you plan a little bit. So that's great. And then to go to, if you wanted to watch the videos over here, House and Senate and committee video, you can look down and click on what's coming up. And then it'll show you, you can watch the whole thing, which is great. The other thing I wanted to share, hang on, let me go back. I'm not very good at this. Oh, there it is. Okay, so Kansas Mental Health Coalition. So this is the website. So if you wanted to attend Advocacy Day, the individual link is, you can click on that and you can register. And it gives you like registration, exhibits, it gives you the agenda, and then it talks about how to schedule. It's like it's your courage to schedule an event and to meet with your legislators. But on this page, the front page, there is a section here that says contacting your legislator and appointment for Advocacy Day tips. And if you click on that, it gives you how to advocate for your cause and how to contact them, how to schedule a meeting, the words, if you're nervous about asking for an appointment, you know, how to do that, how to prepare, which again, if you have your advocacy, that backgrounder, you know, that's helps you a lot. But it gives you the 6 tips. It just gives you all the information on how to call and contact. And if people are not comfortable with that, they can still, you know, we have somebody on the Kansas Mental Health Coalition that can set appointments for you if, you know, if it makes you nervous. But all that information is there and it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I do, it's like I say, I have my therapy. I don't know what I do without therapy and what I do without my NAMI people and Mental Health Coalition people, because it's just, it's needed, you know? So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So Lori, what's the first step in getting involved in advocacy?
My first step I did was the Mommy Smarts class. Just because it kind of gave me the tools to make me feel comfortable to go to Topeka. Like I said, I went to Topeka that January after, and my husband was up there for work. So I went to the Capitol and made appointments because I knew I was going to be there in February. So I made my appointments in person. And then I went in February, and it's very nerve-wracking at the beginning, but it's just, once you're, like I said, when it's your passion and once you're there and once you get your little mojo, or I don't know, your routine or whatever, it's so nice just because you really you want to help people and you want to make a difference. And it's just a lot of times I feel like if you go to the Capitol and you see them face to face, I kind of feel like I want them to know who I am and I'm not going to go away.
Mhm.
But NAMI Smarts helps you get that path going.
Now, how often are NAMI Smarts classes scheduled?
It depends. Usually they are in the fall, usually from October to January or February, just with Mental Health Advocacy Day in March. We try to line up classes before that.
Hmm. So with any just advocacy related questions with NAMI Smarts, um, so you included your contact information, right? Be able
Yeah.
to just ask you about that for more information. You said you teach those classes?
Yeah. And the one we have on March 12th is the in person. So usually we do them on Zoom because it's hard because Chris is over in Dodge City and I'm down in Caldwell. So we work together and do it on Zoom.
And last year you had that in-person one the day before too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
how did
I,
that go?
we only had two people, but it was good. So one of the gals we had on the Zoom one showed up and came up and started talking to me. I'm like, why do I know this person? Then I was like, oh my gosh, you were on our Zoom. And she had 10 appointments that day with legislators. And then one of the guys from the in person had made 4 appointments. So it's nice to see people hitting the floor.
Yeah, definitely using those skills that they're learning in the class.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me switch back over to that PowerPoint to put your contact information back on the screen.
And I can put it in the chat too, if that would
Okay.
help.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So Laura will put her contact information in the chat, but it's also on here, and definitely she truly is very skilled when it comes to advocacy. Whenever I was working on my own testimony for the House Bill 2353, Lori was the first person I contacted. Like, hey, I need help. I've never done this before, and Lori was great. She walked me through the process, and I have taken NAMI Smarts for advocacy before, but that was a few years back, so I definitely needed that refresher. So I appreciate you and everything you do for advocacy.
Thank you. Say it's kind of therapy for me too, you know?
It's that boots on the ground work that we talk a lot about in NAMI. And it's awesome to have advocates like you that are passionate about the cause, and then you're able to go forward and, as you said, make all these appointments, and you teach these classes, and it's uh, we base a lot of what we do on our volunteers, so thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Daniel's voice.
So with Laura's presentation leading us into what NAMI Kansas does for advocacy. And one of our main things is that we are in NAMI Kansas, we advocate together for the lives of individuals who have a mental illness, but not just the individuals, also for their family members and their caregivers. And as we heard in Lori's story, she's a parent who decided to take her story and start advocating because she knew that her son needed a voice. And in NAMI Kansas, we um, that's just part of our mission. So we believe a person that they have the power to change how decision makers how that decision is made. And one of those things is by sharing your personal story. And Lori does that. She's able to share her story, on what she lived through with her son, and how what she's supporting through her advocacy, how that's helping. And in with NAMI, we believe that everyone's is an expert of their own story. So that could be a peer. They're the experts in their own stories. So their lived experience is what makes them an expert, and then they're able to go on and share their story and help lead that change. And same thing with family members and caregivers. They're able to learn these skills and share their side of their story, because their voice is also important, and them advocating is also something that helps us lead to the change. And that per- attaching a personal story is also, it helps just really change the hearts and the minds of policymakers. Sometimes it's you get caught up maybe in the anxiety or the stress of, well, you don't want to share anything too personal, or uh, you're not comfortable with your story at that much. So that is something why in NAMI Smarts for Advocacy, they they help you write your story and how to, like Lori mentioned in that first module, you're able to write your story, you work on it. The teacher is able to, or the trainer is able to guide you on how to writing your story effectively, how you are able to learn how to do that in an elevator pitch sort of way, or in a more drawn out way, or you learn how to write your story. And a person's story is sometimes, that's the biggest thing you could use for to lead for that change. Oftentimes, when a person shares a story, that's active evidence of this is why the change is needed. So in with NAMI Kansas and the NAMI national efforts too, that's one thing that we always advocate for, is for our family members, our peers, to be able to become the experts of their own story, to be able to learn how to use their story, so they could voice their opinions and voice the need for change. And it's always important to know that one person can make a difference. And it sometimes it seems like, well, in the grand scheme of things, it's not. You're only just one person, but your voice and your story, it makes it strong. So this is really where, writing testimonies is important. As Lori mentioned, was there to testify this turnaround whenever they had that committee hearing, and that's also important. But if you're not able to make it in person, like for example, if you're out in Southwest Kansas and making that more than 5 hour drive is difficult, you're able to submit your written testimonies virtually. Um, you submit them via email, and then those committees are able to listen to that or read that, and that's also important. So really calling for advocates, calling for volunteers that support the cause, is and writing their testimonies and being able to submit those, that is a very good first step. And it is difficult. It is and that first time it is nerve-wracking, but that's why we have those resources to help. We have the NAMI Smarts classes that we offer. Um, we also have more information online if a person needs that help. Yes, Lori.
So, and people do listen. That's one thing I forgot to mention. I emailed tons of people at the beginning, even at the national level. And like Ron Estes, he got one of his, like Emo Berkowitz, who's a representative, and I'm not a constituent of him. He's outside of Wichita, but he called me one night and he goes, "Hey, Congressman Estes wanted me to call you and talk to you." Like, oh my gosh, somebody did listen. So you never know. Like, just keep doing it because eventually somebody's going to listen to you. So I've met with him. The governor hooked me up with, which we used to be the KDADS, Andy Brown, but now he's the deputy secretary. Hooked me up with him, with her constituent. I mean, it's they do listen, and so don't give up because you know, the more you're out there, the more you get stuff, they will listen and they will get back with you.
And I remember in the class, my trainer mentioning that you can't be annoying, and it maybe yourself, you feel like you're being annoying, you're sending too many emails, making too many phone calls, but that's not an actual thing. I think on average, you have to reach out and contact a person maybe 6 times before it's like, okay, this is something that I really do need to listen to. And keeping in mind that all these individuals are really busy. And so seeing multiple emails multiple times a day, that is one of those like red flags, like, oh, maybe this is something that I really need to pay attention to. And again, if you take that NAMI Smarts for Advocacy, it really does break down all those steps. And your teachers will mention skills like that. You know, you can never be too annoying. You continue to email a person, call a person, or every time you run into them when you're in an elevators or somewhere, always having your elevator speech ready, or really know what it is that you're wanting to say, because you have those couple seconds or you have that one email to make that impression. So it's always those skills, just kind of referring back to the beginning, just being able to strengthen your skills, and that comes by practice. Practice makes perfect, and eventually you'll get your elevator speech down, your how to write testimonies down. It becomes second nature. I feel like I've noticed Lori is just able to write testimonies, and she writes great ones, and we could later on use those as an example of, this is, with practice, this is what you're able to do. And it's always a really good skill to have. And this NAMI Kansas also has what is called the NAMI Kansas Advocacy Committee, and this advocacy committee logs in, and you might have to correct me, Lori, but I think it's the fourth Thursday of the month at 4 p.m.
I know we are meeting next Thursday, or I think so. That's the fourth. Yeah, the fourth
Yeah.
Thursday at 4. Yeah.
So
And
with
also,
yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead.
I would say use your friends and family too. I had a cousin email her rep because he was on the Judiciary Committee, and he came up and just shook my hand at the end because he knew who I was then, and said, keep in contact, let me know what you need to do. So use your people too to email and reach out, because that helps also.
Definitely. Family, friends, people within an organization, all, and really touching back on that advocacy at a larger scale. If you all have those same advocacy goals, and you gear up together and you're emailing or calling or writing testimonies, numbers really are significant in some of these cases. And with the NAMI Kansas Advocacy Committee, we meet every single month throughout the year, no matter if we're not in session, we're still meeting, and we're working on those on that list. And Lori showed the list up on the screen. Those really what we're focusing on, our main focuses, and that's also published on the NAMI Kansas website. So at any given point of the year, you go to the NAMI Kansas website and you can see what we are advocating for. And on the advocacy committee, we check in, we're making sure, like, okay, where do we need to rally our volunteers? Or if you're able to be there in person, okay, this is what we're all going to do together, just rallying up, or splitting up the work sometimes is easier. You know, Lori could go speak to this person and I could go speak to that other person. So with that advocacy committee, they try their best to really split up that work, and making sure that we're going through that list, we're advocating for these important things every year. And also on the, like how Lori showed on the website, you're able to the advocacy committee, then we could touch base too and go on the website and making sure we have the information together for any potential hearing or anything else that we're preparing and doing our research. And that's why it's important, and why I mentioned earlier, research is important, and credible sources are also important. And sometimes that first step is joining, for Lori, it was finding NAMI Smarts for Advocacy, and then that led her into joining the NAMI Kansas Advocacy Committee, and then doing all this for her community and statewide. And sometimes that could be the first step. So the first step could be joining the committee, and then beginning to be more involved with advocacy there, or really just taking a NAMI Smarts for Advocacy class and really learning what being an advocate is like, and how we continuously just work together for all these different causes. And relating all that back to, why is this important for AOT? And advocates are really the fuel that keeps us going, and that this doesn't have to be just completely on the statewide level. If you're if you're breaking it down to each individual community mental health center or each individual community, you are being an advocate at that individual level. You are advocating for these participants to be on an AOT program, or you're advocating for them to maybe be on a, take specific medication, or be on a specific program that they might need. So advocacy is always important. In some areas, we also see a lot of family members, they're advocating for their loved ones and making sure that they're on AOT programs, or they're advocating on how important AOT is. Um, Last year, so if you go to the treatment advocacy website, there's a printed report on how family members, on how they've been advocating for AOT. So they've also been part of that fuel that has kept it going. And also, on that individual level, you kind of also, when you're trying to build up an AOT program, you're advocating to your community on why this important, and you're sharing that information, that reliable information on, like, these are the numbers, this is why it would work. And so it's important to, sometimes we don't even think about it. We're not that we're advocating for something new, or for some sort of change. And it's important. It starts with one person, it starts with a group. In some of our communities that are beginning to start up AOT, it's just maybe a family member that realizes their loved one needs something, and then they they're researching on things that could help them. They realize AOT would be beneficial, and then that leads them to, okay, let's rally up some more volunteers, some more parents, and let's figure out how we could, present this and take this to the community mental health center, take this to the courts, and see what we could build. Um, Part of our NAMI family to family class, on when we're teaching and our class participants more about treatment options, and on ways they could help their loved one, there actually is a section on that assisted outpatient treatment, and how it's beneficial, and how it's also is very beneficial for individuals with agnosignosia. And sometimes for some of our family members that are going through that class, that's the first time that they hear about AOT, and then they're able to then access more information or research. What truly is AOT? What can I do? And that's how advocacy starts, and we've seen it everywhere. And on that report that the Treatment Advocacy Center has on their website, sometimes you could read down how family members, it led them to wanting to do more for their loved one. Um, and that also is with clinicians or a judge, a lawyer, or maybe peers themselves. They're just advocating, they're pushing forward for that change. They realize, like, hey, this is a really good resource, and what can we do to implement that? Um, and or at a you start at that individual level, you work up your volunteers, and then you are spreading it more to that larger scale advocacy. uh, and touching base on any of those, any need for more resources and such. If you go to that treatment advocacy center, they have a section just for advocacy, and it could connect you to different grassroots advocates or throughout the nation. And once you're connected, you could ask them, well, how did you start this, or how did your process go? And if they have any already created documentation, like flyers and such, those are also posted on the resource library if they've been shared. So really connecting with other advocates throughout the nation, or even throughout the state, it really does help just um, gear everything up. The Treatment Advocacy Center also offers their monthly different webinar chats, and every month it's a different population that's meeting, like the judges or the clinicians or those advocates. They're meeting, and they're discussing more on what they could do, and that is a really good network for just advocacy nationwide. And you could take that back on how you could do that at the state level. And at the state level, there's different organizations that you could be involved with, and sometimes, like what happened with like Lori's story, sometimes finding NAMI Kansas and could lead you and could open up the doors for a lot of different advocacy groups and a lot of different resources. NAMI Kansas within our website, we have also a resource table, or a database, and within that database, it has information on resources all over the state. And that is a great first step sometimes, just getting in touch with NAMI and then accessing that database, and you could go from there. Um, and just it takes one person really to help create that change, or help rally up a group of people, to help them. As Lori mentioned, even family members, friends, if they know you're passionate about something, really sharing that information, and maybe just suggesting that they maybe take some training, or they walk them through how, like, hey, this is how you could write a testimony. It really does help. Numbers are always great. Um, yes, Lori.
Sorry, I was gonna say, so NAMI has the podcast they've been working on, and the one that's gonna be in March is on advocacy. And so I talk about the bill we were doing. One person's talking about the advocacy committee, and the other was talking about the whole judicial system and how it works. So coming up in March, that'll be another, if somebody wants to listen to that podcast when it comes out, that'd have some more information also.
Yeah, that is a really good. I forgot about that. That the episode is coming out in March. And I think when they were planning it, they the hope was to hope the episode come out before Advocacy Day on March 13th, just in case anyone needs a quick recap on what the advocacy efforts are for, or really break down on what advocacy is like. I think listening to that podcast episode on your way there would be a great resource, and I will send out that information via email, to all the contacts that I have, because I think it will be a really good resource. And I guess that's another really good plug-in for that NAMI Kansas podcast, which is named I Am NAMI Kansas. And each month it's a different topic, and we include really good resources that can be used within the communities. The March one that is on advocacy, I think that will be a really good resource, especially if you're advocating during the month of March, or really at any given point. And then the episode in February was actually on rural and frontier communities, and that is also a really good just resource in specific. The goal of that podcast is to you give it a quick listen. They're between 30-minute episodes to an hour, and they have filled with resources, and maybe answering one of those like frequently asked questions that many individuals have. So thank you, Lori, for reminding me about that, and definitely we'll look forward to that episode. And I think it'll be a really good breakdown of how to prepare for March, because it can be anxiety provoking for some individuals, especially if it's your first time there. Um, it's a fast-paced day. There's a lot of shaking hands and talking to people, but it really is beneficial, and it just proves how just one person, one story could create a lot of really good connections, and just help lead the path into something else. Um, which leads me into just that reminder, and then Lori mentioned it a little bit too. So we have that House Bill 2353, and um, it has left the committee. It's heading over to the House floor, which is exciting, but that's just one step in the process. So it's important to not lose that momentum. Last week on the 8th, we had that committee hearing, and there were in-person testimonies, and we had written testimonies. And I know definitely that week I was um, first thought in my head was like, well, hopefully I'm not being annoying with all these emails and phone calls that I'm making. But when it comes to advocacy, being persistent is important. And I remember I spoke with Lori early that week. I think it was that Monday. Like, hey, I need help writing a testimony, and I just need pointers. And she did a wonderful job at guiding me through that. And then we were able to rally up some of our NAMI Kansas volunteers to write some testimonies, and that also included some parent advocates that we have in one of the counties that are trying to bring up AOT, and really their story is what makes a difference. When these advocates are able to write testimonies or speak, and they're able to include their testimonies and how the this bill would potentially impact our lives in a very positive way, and that's always something very good to see. And when writing a testimony, especially that first time, I think it could be a little intimidating because it's like, well, how do I write it, or what do I put in there? And if you haven't taken maybe that NAMI Smarts for Advocacy class, or you can't find resources like Lori had the one that she brought up, kind of like that breakdown on how to what you could say or what you could write. Um, Definitely reach out. You could reach out to me. And then I could guide you to Lori, or I could guide you on how to write a testimony, because I feel like I kind of know how to do that now after last week. But just remembering that we still need testimonies. It's not over yet. And a lot of individuals will just not just involved with the NAMI Kansas advocacy stuff, but also with like our AOT programs. Will probably be hearing from me, because it's really important to write those testimonies and to really gather our support, so we're able to just help. We're at the beginning of that process. That beginning went well, and now we just need to continue on with our momentum and continue gathering our advocates, and continue writing testimonies. Um, and if you want to like a breakdown of that House Bill 2353, you really can go into the website like Lori brought up on the screen, and you're able to go into that committee, or see that breakdown of who the representatives are on the committee, and if you um, want to reach out to any of them, or just read some the other testimonies are posted on there too, their personal information as well. And if you have any chance to be there in person, if you're closer, also, as Lori mentioned, that sheet that she brought up where you write down all those details, it really does make a difference when you're there in person, because it's you're able to then make that relation into anyone that comes up to you. So I would like to thank everyone for logging on, and if anyone has any questions for Lori, you go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up, or email them to her at a later time. Um, so for those that are interested in the CAU information, Amy just sent on the chat the link for the evaluation. So if you could fill out that evaluation, and then here momentarily we will be sending out the link for the CAU certification too. So Lori, any final words to say before we finish here in a bit?
I don't think so. It just, you know, I like being in person because I want them to know who I am. And I think that helps, but they will take it anyway. And they don't be afraid of them, because when you start talking to them, like Representative Carpenter, and I told him, so I know I'm not your constituent, but he's like, I'm here for everybody in Kansas. You know, Representative Clifford, when I talked to him last year about the supportive decision making, he's like, well, I have a daughter who's 36 and I worry about her all the time. You know, they're actually human beings, and they, you know, there are some that I don't see eye to eye with, and we know it, and it's just how it's going to be. But the majority of them are lovely and want to help. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I think sometimes, especially when you're advocating at that larger scale, it can be anxiety provoking. But that's why we have those resources in place, like NAMI Smarts for Advocacy, and that breakdown really does help. It makes a difference, because you know what to expect, you know how to it in those different modules. They walk you through how to make a phone call, how to leave a voicemail, how to write an email, how to do your elevator speech. So it really guides you through the entire process, and it makes it so much easier to just go through.
And don't be, and if you get emotional, that's okay. Because I always choke up and like, I'm sorry. And they're like, no, you're good. I mean, they just are, So it's nice.
it's part of your story. And
Yeah.
it makes it all that more wonderful.
Yeah.
So, and then that second link is the link for that CU request, and then Amy will post up the password too. It is password protected. And that link should be ready to go. If anyone has any issues with it not working, just shoot me an email. It is timed, so depending on the time, it might not be active, and it does time out here at some point today too. So just making sure if you're requesting any CEUs, to make sure you go in and fill out that evaluation and that request for the certificate within this morning, so you make sure not to forget to do that. And I will also send that website information that Lori had brought up today during her presentation. I'll send that out when I send all the resources, because I definitely did not know that all that information was there prior to taking the advocacy class, and then took that advocacy class forever ago, and then I was blanking out. And so it's always a good reminder to the information is there. Sometimes you just have to find it. But I thank you all for joining us today. Let me